Chapter 10. The Goddess and the Darkness. High, white clouds drifted by overhead, and a warm breeze gently tossed the ends of Zelda's long hair, tickling her neck. The sensation, coupled with a few thrilling songbirds, pulled her from the darkness that had enveloped her for the last...
How long has it been? Where am I?
Zelda pushed herself up slowly, blinking in the bright sunlight. She lay in a field of grass surrounded by woodland areas on 3 sides, and the 4th overlooked a wide green valley with a river running along its trough, disappearing under 2 mountains standing close together in the distance. She gasped and blinked, shocked by the beauty now laid out before her. The wind sighed through the grass.
I am pleased to see you awake, my dear.
Zelda turned to look at the source of the voice. A woman approached her slowly. Her smile was radiant, and at first glance, Zelda thought that her mother walked toward her. The woman was relatively tall with golden brown hair, green eyes, and delicate pointed features. She reached her hands toward Zelda, though she was not near enough to touch. Zelda took the implied invitation and stood, studying small white flowers embroidered on the surface of the long white sundress she now wore. She looked up and met the woman's eyes as her extended hands closed supportively on Zelda's elbows.
We have much to discuss.
The woman intoned warmly, a soft glow emanating from her person. Zelda lifted her chin, meeting the stranger's gaze evenly.
Who are you? And where am I?
She asked, her voice calm and quiet. She felt strangely content with her unexpected surroundings and her new companion. The glowing woman tilted her head and deepened her smile.
You know me, though you may not be able to recognize it now. I am Hylia, and I have been your companion and support throughout the last few years.
The goddess stated. Zelda's eyes widened.
That would explain her familiarity.
She realized.
But that would mean...
She looked again at their surroundings, noting the serenity, peace, and the apparent harmony of their setting.
Is this... the sacred realm?
Hylia gave a small nod, her smile becoming more amused, as though she still kept a secret.
I recalled your spirit here from the darkness where it was adrift. You are a vessel, Zelda. As your mother before you and her mother before her, on and on back through history to the first Zelda.
She began, turning to stand beside Zelda and prompting her to begin a slow walk.
You are also your own person, strong, intelligent, and passionate. Unlike any before you, however, you have chosen to cast away my divine presence inherent in your blood prematurely, and it was this that caused your spirit to become unmoored.
Hylia no longer smiled. Her light seemed to dim to some extent as she looked at the ground before them with a downcast expression.
I restored your friend, as it was obvious that this was your intent. I must ask you, however, did you understand the gravity of your actions before taking them?
Zelda stopped walking, feeling the weight of the goddess' admonishment like a stone around her neck. Her chest seemed to tighten, and her pulse skipped faster.
I wanted to give my friends and my people the best chance at overcoming our present darkness that I could. I judged that right now, Minna is better equipped to deal with the threat.
She answered after a pause, voice becoming stronger as she continued.
I did not mean to cause offense, or to sunder our relationship, Your Eminence.
The breeze picked up, blowing the goddess' hair from her shoulders. She closed her eyes and smiled faintly, enjoying its caress. After a moment, she opened her bright green eyes and gazed out into the blue sky.
It is as I suspected then, child, and you were unaware of what you did.
Hylia restated, a certain amount of relief creeping into her voice.
Your reasoning is sound, though I must disagree with your conclusion.
She looked at Zelda out of the corner of her eye.
Have you so little faith in your own strength?
Zelda tucked her chin and took a deep breath before replying.
In truth, I have never been tested in a candid setting. At the first sign of a true threat to the kingdom, I froze.
She turned and looked out over the gentle countryside below.
People deserve someone who will fight for them. Midna and Link are doing just that. Midna is from the same realm as Zant, which leads me to believe that she will know how to stop them once and for all. I put my faith in my friends.
She continued slowly, working through her thoughts as she spoke.
As the future queen of Hyrule, I need to be able to trust my allies to perform admirably for the good of the kingdom. Do I not?
She turned and looked at Hylia hard, caught between frustration, doubt, and apprehension.
Why does she question me so? What's done is done.
She pondered. The wind lifted the ends of her hair again as she looked back at the goddess. Hylia's smile grew fractionally as she clasped her hands behind her back and took a few steps in slow pursuit of Zelda.
Yes, child. One must always have allies.
She replied, her voice calm and clear as a still lake.
Some would even deem such a sentiment wise.
A quiet chuckle escaped Hylia's nose and completely took Zelda by surprise.
I merely wish for you to recognize the strength and fortitude that you yourself have. There are still many trials ahead of you in every path of time discernible.
She reached out and caressed Zelda's cheek, brushing the pad of her thumb along a cheekbone tenderly.
My little bird.
Zelda's mouth fell open at the sound of Hylia's last words, and she turned, hugging her arms. She made her way to a small rock sticking out of the sea of grass and sat with her back to it, breathing. She blinked.
Hylia must have some memories of her past lives then.
The goddess followed and knelt next to Zelda.
I did not mean to upset you.
She murmured. Zelda shook her head gently as Hylia continued.
I, too, would see you spread your wings and soar, princess.
She paused and shifted to her hip, looking out over the meadow with Zelda. After a few moments, she rejoined.
There is the matter of your fellow blessed to discuss yet.
Zelda took a deep breath, looking up at the sky. She turned to watch her counterpart and quietly prompted.
Fellow blessed?
Hylia nodded.
The shadowed usurper is but a pawn. You have met with another bearer of the Triforce already. I fear you must be prepared to meet the third as well.
She murmured, her light dimming and eyes downcast.
Should the three of you meet, you must be ready to use your power, Zelda. You are strong, much stronger than you realize. Even so, it will be a struggle.
Zelda furrowed her brow.
You mean I am destined for this conflict?
Hylia gave another small nod, and Zelda sighed.
All my life, I have heard tales of the princesses who came before me. I thought them amazing. Their deeds worthy of the honor in which they are enshrined, but...
The breeze picked up, swirling Zelda's hair across her face. She closed her eyes before continuing.
I confess that I had hoped... I did not wish to be counted among them.
She did not raise her voice over the shifting airs, but she knew Hylia heard her. A warm hand closed around one of her own.
Little bird,
the goddess cooed.
You must gather your light and shine brightly. You have the potential to be one of the greatest of our line, if only you can learn how to trust yourself.
With her other hand, Hylia reached out and smoothed some of Zelda's hair behind her ear. Zelda tried to breathe deeply, but her emotions got the better of her. She had held her control for so long. With a choked sob, she bowed her head forward until it rested against Hylia's hand over her own. Tears flowed freely now. Even as she struggled to draw breath, Zelda managed to assert.
How am I to trust myself when I was unable to protect those I loved most in the world? How am I...
She broke off and allowed the sobs to come more fully, giving voice to her suffering. Hylia held her and rubbed her back.
I could not stop him. I could not.
Zelda continued. She took a few deep, quick breaths.
I feel I must be in absolute control at all times. It is exhausting. Even so, it was not enough. I fought with my mentor, my mother, my education was incomplete. We do not even have enough time.
Zelda cleared her throat and wiped her eyes. Looking up into the blue sky, she rejoined.
I have no interest in any of the men presented to me, so I will fail to produce an heir as well. You say that I must trust myself. How am I to do that when I find myself so lacking?
Hylia continued to rub soothing circles around Zelda's back as she listened to Zelda speak. She nodded as she processed the words. After a pause, Hylia slowly intoned.
I will repeat that you must trust yourself, Zelda. Trust in your own strength and fortitude, and until you are able to do so, you can trust in me and in my judgment.
Zelda looked up at Hylia with watery eyes. The goddess continued.
I know it feels hard right now, and you have lost much, but there is still much to gain and to experience. Have confidence in your wisdom, and everything will work out as it should.
She gave Zelda a warm smile, and Zelda tried to return it, sniffling through her tears.
I will try to do as you suggest, my lady,
Zelda offered. Hylia's smile widened by a fraction, and she gave a shallow nod.
Rest now. You will return soon, and I will not be with you. I must remain with your friend if she is to endure.
Zelda turned and leaned into the goddess's embrace before murmuring.
Midna. She is also a princess, is she not? She rules in the Twilight Realm.
Hylia nodded against Zelda's head and replied.
The two of you have each suffered much in this situation. You are more alike than you give yourself credit for, child.
Zelda nodded, allowing her eyelids to close. A sudden drowsiness overcame her, and she allowed it to lull her into subconsciousness. The pain in her leg drew Zelda from her slumber. She wrinkled her brow against the sensation. She lay on a soft cushion with a blanket draped over her. The quiet crackle of the fire came from the other side of the room. Zelda turned her head, eyes still closed, and heard footsteps approach her. Her heart sank and her stomach clenched. Sant.
Princess,
He hummed. Zelda felt the cushion beneath her sag a bit as he sat nearby.
so pale, so pristine. Is this what living the light has done for you? All these years?
His breath hissed from his nose before icy fingertips pushed an errant strand of hair behind Zelda's undamaged ear. She flinched at the unexpected contact, and the man chuckled darkly.
Awake, are you? Very good. Very good indeed.
Zant said, his voice a bit stronger than it had been a moment before. He rested his hand on her hip, above the injury he had given her earlier in the week.
You were found on the floor, unconscious. Explain to me how that happened. Now.
He continued, an imperious timbre coloring his voice by the end of his statement.
Commanding and expectant.
Zelda registered in the back of her mind. Her focus was almost completely on their point of contact, Zant's fingertips tapping against her hip bone. She opened her eyes by half and saw the familiar view of her bedroom with the addition of the usurper's dark and brooding form. The curled tongue of his mask was rolled away again so she could see his thin lips quirked in a playful smirk. Zelda's heart raced in her chest, discomfort crawling along her limbs. Her eyes felt puffy, and her head ached.
Do not touch me,
She whispered, her voice abruptly swallowed by her emotions. Her throat felt constricted, and tears burned behind her half-closed lids.
Get away from me.
She added, forcing her voice to work properly. Zant chuckled again, fingertips pressing harder against Zelda's body. pinning her down. She gasped a sob.
You'll answer me first. What happened?
Zant demanded. He leaned forward to loom over Zelda's prone form.
No!
Zelda gasped.
Please. I cannot breathe. I cannot.
She squeezed her eyes shut as more tears burst forth unbidden. Zant's breath fanned across her face, and she recoiled into the pillow as deeply as she could, every nerve in her body screaming to escape from the man's presence. She gasped, trying to catch her breath. Her fingers and toes were beginning to tingle, and her chest hurt where it now pulled on itself. Zant pressed harder on her hip bone, and she whimpered, flinching against the added sensation.
You will learn your place, Princess.
He hissed, his face now mere inches from Zelda's. Another violent sob tore from her lips. The panic was too great. She felt no control now.
As in how? Right.
Zant.
A deep, commanding voice sounded from the sitting room, and Zelda heard the main door to her rooms close with a dull thud. She took a few quick breaths, struggling to quiet her emotions once more. Zant bared his teeth and slowly sat up. He stood, mask continuing to stare down at Zelda, and with one more pulse of pressure, withdrew from the bedside. Zelda gasped and released a shuddering breath. Tears continued to stream from her eyes, but at least they were silent now. Hearing her tormentor retreat into the sitting room, she closed her eyes and turned onto her side, curling into herself and hugging her legs into her chest as best she could without causing her injured leg pain. A quiet conversation took place in the adjoining room, but all Zelda could focus on was her fear and her pain. She struggled to breathe, releasing more sobs than exhales, and feeling utterly lost. After a time, she sensed a surge of magic from the other room, and everything became quiet. The crackle of the fire even seemed to dampen its intensity. Zelda turned her face into her pillow fully. The sudden rush of emotions on her waking had left her feeling incredibly drained. Her chest still seemed to vibrate and clench inward, but her panic had mostly faded away now. She took a slow, deep breath and exhaled. A quiet knock on the open door to her room made Zelda split her eyelids open once more and turn her head. Soft feet padded to the other side of the bed before the mattress sunk again.
I apologize for the intrusion, Princess, but I have your evening meal. How are you feeling?
The quiet voice was warm and somewhat rough, deep and masculine. It was unlike any voice she had heard before. Zelda closed her eyes again and pressed into the pillow.
Go away, please. I would like to be alone.
She whimpered, pulling the blanket higher over her shoulder as she spoke. There was a pause before Zelda heard a quiet sigh behind her.
I understand, Your Eminence.
The man said as he rose again from the bed.
I will leave the tray here with you. You must be exhausted. You have been through so much in recent times.
He paused again.
May I return to check on you tomorrow?
Zelda took a few breaths as she processed the request. Though she did not know the voice, something about the presence at her back was familiar. She gave a faint nod and murmured,
Yes, you may.
Until tomorrow, then.
Zelda heard him pad away, the only true noise made by the fabric trailing on the stone floor. Before disappearing into the sitting room, he paused and called out.
Rest easy, Princess. Zant will not be bothering you any longer.
Zelda let the tray sit on the other side of the bed for as long as she could before her hunger overcame her. She felt somewhat refreshed when she finished eating her dinner of creamy soup, thick-crusted bread with butter, sparkling wine, and fresh fruit. The soup was again flavored perfectly, with enough spice to feel, but not enough to make her unhappy. Now that Zelda was properly fed, she shifted the blankets still draped over her legs and pulled her injured leg closer to her face. A frown wrinkled her brow. Her bandage seemed freshly placed. The somewhat sour smell of an herb poultice still potent enough to make her scrunch her nose. The bandage itself was clean, but the fibers bore a striking resemblance to sand in color. All of her own bandages were pristine white.
Yes.
She sighed.
Yes, I will have questions for my visitor tomorrow.
Zelda slid her heel forward again and pulled the blankets back into place. The fire continued to roar in the hearth, and she absently wondered how it continued to burn when no wood had been added to the pile in at least a couple of hours. She turned and looked out into the night, arms wrapped around herself.
I wonder if Midna has found the sacred grove yet.
She mused.
She truly is a great ally for such dark times. I can only hope that they will return soon, victorious.
She shifted, cozying down in her bed. Rain began to patter on the panes of her windows.
I will keep my guard up. I do not know how that stranger can claim to know Xant's mind, but I will not place my trust in him until he gives me a reason to.
Zelda resolved. Reaching for her magic, she was shocked to feel how weak it had become. Refusing to panic again, she forced herself to take 3 large, deep breaths in and out. She gave a small shake of her head.
I suppose this must be the result of losing my light. Of asking the goddess to save Midna.
Setting a weak shield around herself, she finally closed her eyes and allowed herself to slip into a heavy sleep. The dawn rays of the sun spilled across Zelda's face, pulling her back into consciousness. She covered her eyes with her arm and turned to face away from the windows, releasing a hiss as pain flared in her knee. Zelda groaned, not ready to face the day. A moment later, she pushed herself upright and blinked. She did not know when her visitor would be here, but she would not be meeting him in her bed again today. Zelda gingerly made her way to her wardrobe and pulled the medic kit from the bottom before returning to the edge of the bed. With practiced hands, she unwound the old bandage and inspected the puffy, torn flesh beneath. Zelda hummed, pleased to note some improvement. She applied ointment to the wounds as she thought.
Though the joint itself still worries me, I still struggle to bear the weight fully.
Once she finished redressing the wounds, Zelda returned the kit to the wardrobe and selected a warm blue and white gown to wear. It bore Triforce motifs hidden in the hems and skirt patterns, though one who did not know would likely have to stare for a moment or two to see them. Zelda made her way to the window and sat in her chair as she combed and braided her hair back. The sun shone with strength, as though it too desired an end to the darkness that had accosted Zelda lately. A small smile appeared on her lips as she considered the golden rays drying up the rain puddles still visible on the street below. Zelda secured the end of her braid with a white ribbon and took a deep breath. She tried to let the sunlight grow in her heart, take root, and nurture her confidence as Hylia had suggested.
I am blessed thoroughly by the gods. I will get through this if I can remember their strength,
she asserted before standing and turning toward the sitting room. Zelda greeted the man from the chair behind her desk. She paused in the middle of her breathing exercises when the door swung inward. The man had not bothered to knock, and the only noise alerting her to his presence was a low hum as the hinges rubbed against themselves.
Ah, princess.
Her new visitor exclaimed with a bright grin as he crossed the threshold.
How wonderful it is to see you up. May I join you as you break your fast?
The man striding across Zelda's sitting room made no sound, as he had not the night before, which was amazing in itself as Zelda saw his stature. He towered in her room, having been forced to lean forward somewhat as he entered to avoid hitting the doorframe. Blazing red hair framed dark skin and bright golden eyes. He wore a robe of black and purple over a high-collared black shirt and black pants. His feet were wrapped in purple silk slippers.
A Gerudo? A Gerudo male?
Zelda's mind reeled at the implications.
I suppose.
She finally replied, too stunned to come up with another reply. She had wanted him to stay for at least the duration of the conversation, so it really mattered little if that conversation was over a meal. She sat a little straighter in her chair. The man hummed as he passed Zelda before turning and sitting back onto the chaise lounge. Zelda stood and moved slowly to sit at the other end. The man watched her movements, recognition lighting in his eyes. Once she seemed settled, he quietly asked,
Does your leg cause you much pain?
Zelda took a deep breath before replying.
Some, but it is nothing I cannot handle.
Her spine felt rigid. She stared down at her clasped hands. The Gerudo inhaled, paused, shifted.
He
began.
I would not push yourself too hard, my dear. I regret that he may have caused significant damage to one of your ligaments. He should never have touched you at all.
The tone of his voice turned dark by the end, making Zelda almost pity her tormentor. It did not seem this man had much love for the Twilight Invader, and something in his voice whispered of violence. Zelda took a few grounding breaths, continuing to look at her hands in her lap. After a pause, her companion cleared his throat and continued.
As there is no table for us, I fear we may need to sit closer together, Your Eminence. I can continue to hold the tray on my legs.
Zelda glanced at the tray. There was no table, but as there appeared to be one plate each, she was able to make another choice easily. Moving herself a few inches closer, she leaned over and took one of the plates from the tray. Zelda turned and balanced it on the arm of the couch before returning to the tray to claim a mug. She straightened and pulled the full plate of food into her lap.
You can rest the tray between us, so that I may drink my tea with ease,
she stated, lifting a fork and testing the various foods on her plate with it. Her mouth began to water as the aromas rose with her prodding. The man's eyes flashed, but he managed a small smile and half bow before he moved the tray carefully to the cushion between them. He lifted his plate into his lap as well, and they both began eating. The meal consisted of fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, a small portion of freshly roasted meat, roasted potatoes, and water infused with muddled berries. Once again, Zelda marveled at the skill with which the meal had been prepared. It had never occurred to her to ask for more robust flavor profile in her morning eggs. Now, she earnestly wondered if she would be able to tolerate them prepared any other way. She sighed quietly. Just another reason to have a longer discussion with this stranger. Once his food was finished, the man settled back into his side of the couch, mug of tea cradled between his palms. His posture was relaxed and open, but the mug appeared almost comically small in his hands, and the couch almost too small for him. He tilted his head, fixing a golden-eyed expression of curiosity on Zelda's face.
I trust the food is to your liking,
he uttered. His voice was quiet, warm, and somewhat soothing, flowing over her like warm water. Zelda nodded, swallowing her last potato.
Yes, indeed. My compliments to your cooking staff,
she intoned as she reached for her tea mug. She returned her plate to the tray and stretched her injured leg out, grimacing somewhat with the motion. The Gerudo had smirked at her words, but her discomfort returned a neutral expression to his face. He sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and asked,
Would you like something for the pain? I fear it will only increase with continued use.
Zelda flicked her eyes to the man's face, a feeling of unease registering in her mind at the offer. The man's brow was now contracted. accentuating age lines across his brow and around his eyes. His gaze focused on her injured joint, concentrated strongly enough to give the impression that he expected to be able to see through the fabric separating her skin from the air.
I told you already.
Zelda asserted.
It is nothing I cannot handle.
The man looked at her face before sitting back, his expression smooth to neutral in a heartbeat.
I have seen injuries similar to yours before,
he replied, voice calm, but with a slight edge.
I would not see you suffer needlessly.
You take a very strong interest in my well-being, sir.
Zelda stated stiffly, holding his gaze.
As the last remaining in your line, someone ought to.
Zelda dropped her stare and slowly turned her head away, looking into the room. She took a grounding breath.
I can appreciate your concern. However, it does not give you permission to touch me.
The Gerudo shifted his weight on the lounge.
You would have preferred I let the wounds fester?
His voice deepened a few shades, just above a growl.
You misunderstand me. I am grateful for your assistance. I am not, however, condoning your actions. I have been used to a higher level of respect towards my person.
Zelda placated. She fixed him with her intense gaze before rejoining.
If you would continue to interact with me, I ask that you keep this in mind, and also figure out how to accept that I will be managing care for my knee on my own from now on.
After taking a deep breath, the man scoffed and shook his head. Breaking their eye contact, he sipped from his tea. The soothing tone returned to his voice as he replied, voice softer.
Forgive my offense, princess. It was unintentionally given. Among my people, an injury of that nature could mean death. I simply acted out of habit and instinct. As to respect and any loss of modesty you now seem to assume, you need worry not. I removed your outer dress for your comfort and only lifted the skirt as high as necessary to tend your wounds. I was raised in a community of warrior women, Highness. I can assure you that I have seen a woman's leg before.
He sat forward, returning the empty mug to the tray, and shifted to lean elbows on thighs once again. He kept his gaze on the floor. Zelda felt warmth rise into her face at his frank words. If her history lessons were truthful, the Gerudo tribe had been a warrior race almost entirely peopled by women. However, the last recorded instance of a male being born among them ended in tragedy. The tribe seemingly disappeared overnight shortly after the attempted execution and subsequent banishment of their king.
Banishment to the Twilight Realm.
She forced her breathing to remain even as the realization hit her.
You speak of the Gerudo, do you not? Fearsome warrior women of the past era.
The man dipped his chin, a soft smile touching his eyes.
They yet live. The people of Gerudo Desert were lost to us long ago.
She probed, unsure how much that she knew should be revealed. The smile ghosted across the Gerudo man's lips, and he turned his head, lifting his eyes to Zelda's neck.
Aye, Highness, we yet live. I was sundered from the rest of my people long ago, but they still wander the wilds of the world.
He murmured. Almost as an afterthought, he added,
I can feel it.
Zelda looked at her twined fingers, her mug having been set aside moments before. A pause stretched between them as she considered her next question. Before she was able to ask it, the man stood and walked to the door of her bedroom.
How is your fire? Were you warm enough last night?
His eyes searched the room as he spoke. Zelda watched him from the couch, surprised by the change in conversation.
Ah, yes, I was. Quite comfortable, thank you.
Zelda managed to reply, before he could continue distracting her, and before her unease could dissuade her. She asked the biggest question she'd been chewing over since the night before. Though now she had an unsettling idea of the answer.
Who are you?
The man continued to survey the bedroom for a moment before replying. He seemed to straighten some, his presence becoming imposing, and a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth.
He
began before pausing to turn and look down at Zelda directly.
am Ganondorf Dragmire, Princess. and I am now king of these lands.
Zelda blinked twice as she stared at the Gerudo chieftain now making his way toward her. She turned her head and stared straight across her room before releasing a huff of her breath from her nose.
Interesting, Chieftain Dragmile. I do not remember surrendering my lands to you in the course of our meal.
Zelda murmured, doing her best to imitate her mother's imperious tone while keeping her voice soothing.
I do, however, remember the ambitions of a man with the same name, centuries ago. He did not get what he desired. Neither will you.
Ganondorf returned to his seat on the couch, chuckling. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. He leaned back and looked over at Zelda, drawing her gaze, as he replied,
We shall see, my dear.
Turning away from the would-be king, Zelda brushed an errant strand of hair behind her ear. The wounds on her ear had healed, but she consciously lowered her hand, remembering the encounter in the sitting room. A shiver ran down her spine, and she bit her lip. She blinked, straightening her posture.
Now is not the time,
She admonished. Ganondorf shifted a few inches closer to Zelda on the couch, resting his arm on the cushion between without touching her. He hummed before beginning.
I cannot imagine how you have managed to hold your composure together for all these weeks, Princess. Your strength is truly inspiring to witness.
His features softened, and his molten eyes settled on her face. Somehow his expression seemed truly sorrowful, the shadows flickering in his eyes whispering of pain long laid to rest. As she observed Ganondorf, Zelda shook her head. Her reply came quickly after his assertion.
I have not. You witnessed that for yourself last night.
The Gerudo chieftain tilted his head toward her and allowed a small smile to appear on his lips.
Even the most powerful leader is wont to crack under the pressure on occasion. You hold yourself to a very high standard.
He uttered gently. Something stirred in Zelda's heart. This was another leader who offered her understanding, instead of ridicule as she had expected for her behavior the night before. She took a couple of steadying breaths, unsure of how to respond.
Is this not the would-be usurper from years past? I mustn't trust him. I cannot. Can I?
Her head began to ache, her emotions spinning at a dizzying rate. She released a quiet gasp. Ganondorf leaned forward, too far from Zelda to loom over her, but a hulking mass in the corner of her eye nonetheless.
It is an admirable trait for a leader to possess. A drive to always be in control, to arrest power with ease.
He soothed.
However, I might worry for the longevity of such a drive, or more specifically the one who possessed it. Even the most well-meaning of ambitions can end in ruin, Princess.
Zelda turned to look at Ganondorf head-on, exasperation and frustration darkening her features. His golden eyes widened a fraction in response, evidently not expecting such animosity.
Would you truly...
She paused and considered Ganondorf's open expression and large frame before continuing.
Tell me, Chieftain Dragmile, do you have a solution for your perceived problem? Are you here to advise me? Someone ought to look after the sole heir to the throne of Hyrule, after all, and I suppose you might be a suitable candidate?
The smile on Ganondorf's lined face widened slightly, gaining a wolfish quality before he purred.
I might be precisely what you need, Princess.
He stood then, and Zelda did her best not to shrink into the couch as he passed her. He clasped his hands behind his back and gazed out of her patio doors.
Think of it.
He called out, not turning to look at her.
I can support you in all of your efforts to rebuild after Xant's treachery, your wisdom, and my power. Together, we would be unstoppable. We could reshape this land how we saw fit.
Zelda squeezed her eyes shut again against the pain in her head, but opened them once again when she heard the Gerudo shift on his feet. He turned to face her and added quietly,
And I would ensure that no harm came to you ever again, I would care for you, keep you well fed, ensure your happiness. Does that not seem the more agreeable option to you?
Zelda's breath became labored, and her chest heaved with the effort. She attempted to reply, but quickly turned her undivided attention inward. A great pressure was attempting to crush her mind in on itself. She bared her teeth and grunted, struggling against it.
Does that not seem more agreeable to you, Princess?
Ganondorf returned to the lounge and slowly sat within arm's reach of Zelda. She curled into herself a bit more, not wanting to encourage his touch. He reached out and smoothed her hair on the back of her head, ignoring her discomfort with a gesture.
You needn't suffer further. You are relatively innocent in this whole exchange. And you seem competent. Much more so than your counterpart of times gone by. She was a child and acted like it.
He continued, stroking Zelda's dark hair absently. His voice deepened into a growl by the end of his statement. Zelda felt her heart rate quicken.
Please, stop.
She gasped.
If you look to earn my favor, I assure you this is the wrong way to go about it.
Ganondorf blinked, his face becoming blank. He cleared his throat, removed his hand, and slowly stood. Lifting the tray, he turned to the door. Before disappearing into the castle, he turned and uttered,
Do consider my words, Your Eminence. I offer earnestly, but I cannot say how long the offer will stand.
With every step away from her, Zelda felt the pressure in her mind decrease. Once he had closed the door, she sighed heavily and slumped back into the lounge cushions. It had been an exhausting morning. The Gerudo chieftain returned for every meal over the remainder of that day, as well as the next 2 days. He continued to compliment Zelda, though his approach was more subtle than it had been at their first breakfast. Zelda did not have contact with anyone else during this time, which did not escape her notice. She hoped that the staff and advisors that usually peopled the castle were all safe and unharmed. She attempted a sweep of the castle with her magic at one point, but found the undertaking to be too much for her. Her light had been greatly diminished through the loss of the goddess' presence. For their latest dinner, Ganondorf brought her down to one of the royal family's dining parlors. He sat enrobed in his dark clothing, with a black mantle swathed around his shoulders, and his hair neatly pulled back. The red locks were held in place by golden chains suspending a golden gem across his brow. The Gerudo chieftain leaned back in the late king's high-backed chair, after selecting the grilled meat on his plate. Swirling his goblet of red wine before taking a long draught, he turned and surveyed the view of Snow Peak Mountain, drenched in the setting sun. He sighed heavily through his nose before asking,
So, Your Grace, have you considered my offer any further?
Zelda set her utensil down and brought her goblet to her lips, taking a sip herself before replying.
Indeed I have,
She began.
but I fear you will be displeased with my reply. Regardless, it is my duty to give it nonetheless.
Ganondorf sat forward and set his goblet down. He speared a few pieces of food onto his fork and began to eat with enough vigor to suggest that the food had personally offended him. The only sounds in the room were the crackling of fire, the clinking of metal on dishes, and the man's mastication for a while. Zelda waited with her hands folded in her lap, feeling her own anxiety mounting as the seconds passed, but remaining in control of her outward appearance. She knew he would reply when he was ready. This was his way. Zelda had grown used to his communication style in the short amount of time that they had been interacting.
I had hoped for a more collaborative approach from you. I have done all I can to ensure your comfort.
Ganondorf finally growled.
Answer me plainly, once and for all. Will you accept my support, aid, and expertise in the righting of your kingdom? Or will you allow your pride to turn wisdom to folly?
He turned his burning golden eyes on Zelda, piercing her with a sharp stare. She struggled to take a breath as the pressure began gathering at the edges of her mind. Zelda forced a small smile onto her lips and answered,
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chieftain Dragmire, but are you not responsible for the damage that has been done across Hyrule? I believe you sent Zant to prepare the way for you, so to speak. Therefore, I cannot in good conscience accept your offer.
Ganondorf leaned forward and rested an elbow on the table, swirling his goblet once more. His gaze and the pressure intensified. Before he could interrupt, Zelda added,
Even if I was tempted to accept your offer of support, which I am not, I could never be selfish enough to put my own desires over the good of Hyrule. I fear that we have nothing more to discuss.
She closed her eyes and dropped her head until her chin almost rested against her chest. The pain intensified.
Are you truly so proud?
Ganondorf's voice cracked across the room, sharp and intense.
Did you truly consider the opportunity you so easily throw away? Or have you been playing your own game with me?
He stood from the chair and began moving around the table toward the window, setting his goblet down as he went. He barked a mirthless laugh before stating,
No better than your predecessor, you childish brat!
Zelda's chest heaved with the effort to keep his mental attack at bay.
I was biding my time.
She choked out.
Do not call me childish for engaging you in the game that you started. I was biding my time.
She slumped to the back of her chair, gasping for air. The pain was immense, like multiple spikes were being driven into her ears, temples, and the base of her skull. She bared her teeth. Ganondorf turned slowly to face Zelda directly. His dark cloak seemed to drink the light coming in through the window, until he himself seemed darkness embodied. His hair blazed all the brighter, gilded by the setting sun. The gem gleamed as it caught the light.
Biding your time for what, princess?
He growled, enunciating each word slowly. Zelda squeezed her eyes shut, focusing on resisting the painful pressure. Tears pricked Zelda's eyes, but she managed a grim smile.
Courage, my friend. You have not mentioned courage at all in our time together. And he is coming. Yes, I know that he is coming,
she murmured, forcing a strangled chuckle. She cracked her eyes open and grimaced, giving Ganondorf her bravest face of challenge. The man's face contorted with rage, and he began taking slow steps toward her, crying,
You insolent! I will tear the courage from that child's cold, dead corpse.
Dark tendrils of power began emanating from his being, and Zelda was forced to close her eyes to the pain once more as it intensified in waves. Tears began leaking down her cheeks, and she grimaced in a soundless howl of pain.
I will destroy him, slowly and before your eyes. You will see what your choices have wrought, before I grant you the sweet relief of death. You will suffer so greatly.
A significant wave of pain washed through Zelda, and Ganondorf's angered voice faded to a buzz at the back of her mind. She whimpered, and then she lost consciousness. Chapter 11. Courage and Wisdom.
Little bird. Wake up, little bird.
Zelda nestled her face into the warm softness that rested against it. She hummed, trying to remember where she was and what had happened.
Zelda dear, my incredible daughter, you must wake now.
With a start, Zelda pushed herself upright and opened her eyes. Her mother smiled at her and took one of her hands before saying,
I'm so proud of you, my sweet. You've been so strong.
Zelda gasped, her mind knowing what her eyes saw was not possible. She squeezed her mother's hand. It was warm and solid.
Mother? But how—
We do not have time, dearest. Hylia awaits you. I need you to know, before you go, that I love you so much, and I'm so sorry for my part in our relationship's problems.
Her mother's face became mournful, her eyes shining with the weight of her emotions. Zelda had never seen her mother so sorrowful. She released a breath and whispered,
Mother, I am sorry as well. I missed you so much.
She paused, taking her mother's hands in both of hers.
I love you. I forgive you. Be at peace and give my love to Father.
She added after a short pause. Her mother smiled and leaned forward, resting her forehead against Zelda's.
Go and shine bright, little bird. It is time for you to soar.
A high ringing sounded in Zelda's ears. She felt the hard back of a high chair behind her, as well as cool air on her face. The ringing faded and was replaced by a few quiet footsteps. Images of a twilight-drenched sky with various floating platforms flooded her mind, each one from seemingly her own eyes. 2 tall, thin beings with white, black, and cerulean blue markings across their bodies appeared in most of the scenes flashing through her mind. They depicted a childhood not very different from her own, filled with lessons and training. Visions of Zant without his great gray mask joined the mostly joyful memories. Flashes of counsel, quiet conversations, confrontation, and eventually conquest shortly followed. Zelda saw the tall beings being cut down mercilessly. She felt the horror and despair of the moment. She felt the agonizing pain of her form transforming into that of an imp, less than half of her usual stature. She saw the humiliation and derision of being made a court gesture for the usurper, a mere plaything for the intruder to take his frustrations out on. She saw her chance to escape into the light world. She saw Hyrule Castle, and a hurting princess frozen by her own pain. She saw the beast with blue eyes, and a road to vengeance. Zelda opened her eyes.
Princess, I...
Zelda met Midna's eyes, and offered a small, knowing smile.
Say nothing, Midna. Your heart and mine are as one, however briefly. Such suffering you have endured.
She closed her eyes, and tucked her chin before looking at her Twilight analog once more. Midna grasped Zelda's hands in both of hers, and smiled back, tears in her eyes. A young man in green approached them, and now stood smiling at Zelda. A wave of familiarity washed over her as she looked at him, similar to what she had felt at her first meeting with Ganondorf, but somehow softer and more comfortable. As though she already knew she was safe with this one. His bright blue eyes shone with joy as they met her own. She opened her mouth to speak to him, but a rumbling from the center of the throne hall drew their attention. A mass of shadow and golden flame swirled in the middle of the hall. Before Zelda could react, the scene began falling away from her in particles of twilight. With a touch of panic, she looked to Midna. The other princess nodded back to Zelda, and the last thing she saw was dark fragments of a mask floating around the imp's head. All went black for a heartbeat before Zelda suddenly found herself in Hyrule Field. She looked around, surprised. The green-clad swordsman materialized at her side, his own confusion evident in his mirrored actions and expression. Together, they turned to look at the castle.
Why would she do that?
The young man's voice was a confusion of emotion. He shook his head emphatically as he continued.
We fought side by side for weeks now. She knows we're stronger together.
With those statements, Zelda was sure of the stranger's identity. She reached out and grabbed Link's shoulder, squeezing it in support.
She would not lose you now. Knowing that you are safe is enough for her, it would seem.
She uttered. Link grimaced.
That's not her decision to...
An explosion interrupted the young man, and he immediately dropped into a ready stance. Zelda released his shoulder and tried to follow suit, but her injured leg gave out, and she ended up dropping into a low lunge instead. Link glanced back at her gasp of pain, concern in his bright blue eyes. Zelda continued to stare straight ahead, dread pooling larger with each passing second as the smoke before them cleared. On the ridge just ahead, Ganondorf sat astride a war charger. In his hand he held a fragment of a mask, the one that Zelda had always seen on Midna's head. She covered her mouth briefly before she shook her head.
Ominous, but not her end.
Zelda realized, the thought coming to her from seemingly nowhere, but ringing with truth through her mind. Link gasped and growled.
No! It cannot be!
Ganondorf's charger reared back on its hind legs before dashing straight for them. Zelda reached forward and grabbed Link's tunic.
Listen to me,
she called, blood rushing in her ears as her heart rate increased.
Listen, we must defeat him now, once and for all. We will be stronger together. What say you?
Link turned, hesitation plain in his eyes. Zelda willed her light to call out to the 4 light spirits across the land, hoping that Link's Triforce granted him the ability to at least sense her power. He blinked, and the hesitation disappeared. He pulled Zelda to her feet.
What must I do?
Zelda smiled and nodded, pleased with his response.
Spirits of the light, wielders of great power that shines far and wide upon the lands of our world,
she called, concentrating on her power.
In my hour of need, grant me the light to banish evil!
Just before they were trampled under horse hooves, Zelda felt the now familiar embrace of the light as they were transported away from Hyrule Field. When she opened her eyes, Zelda held the light arrows she had requested in her hands. She smiled down at them, pleased that her request had been granted. The familiar sense of her light magic surged through her, practically thrumming as it resonated with the sacred arrows. Looking up at Link, Zelda grinned. This was the final defense. Hyrule would be theirs again.
Link?
She began, her voice firm.
Chosen hero, lend us the last of your power.
She bowed her head, the moment calling for such respect from her heart. Link smiled and extended his hand to her, palm face up.
Together then, Princess, for Hyrule. And for Midna.
He replied quietly. Zelda took his hand and nodded firmly, straightening and meeting his eyes once more. They were again wrapped in the warm embrace of light as they transported back to the field. When they reappeared, Zelda was pleasantly surprised to find they were already on horseback.
I'll try to slow Ganondorf with my light arrows,
Zelda called, brandishing her newly appeared bow of light. Her light magic reacted to her every need and whim effortlessly. Zelda had never felt so in control of her power.
Just keep him within range of my arrows.
Can do, Your Majesty. Let's go, Epona.
Link replied before spurring his horse with a great shout. They rode around Hyrule Field at breakneck pace, Zelda firing arrow after arrow until Ganondorf finally became stunned enough for Link to get in close. Then, the swordsman attacked ruthlessly. They repeated this process a few times before Ganondorf finally fell from his steed, shining sword still in hand. He stood and turned to look at them, laughing maniacally. When he finally caught his breath, he cried,
An impressive looking blade, but nothing more.
He heaved a breath before continuing.
Would you hear my desire? To take this foul blade and use it to blot out the light forever.
He slashed the glowing blade toward them once. Zelda shook her head, burning anger filling her mind. She kept it in check, not wanting their opponent to know he had incensed her. Link dismounted. Zelda grabbed his wrist and murmured,
Be careful.
He looked up at her and nodded once before returning to face their opponent. Once he had moved a few yards away from Zelda and his horse, Epona, a golden wall sprang up, blocking Zelda from joining the fight. Zelda instantly began probing the wall with her light magic, but the magic was solid and impenetrable. She grit her teeth and growled, forced to watch from the sideline as Link fought Ganondorf alone. The young wielder of the Triforce of Courage was a formidable swordsman. He slashed, parried, countered, and pressed his advantage at every opportune moment, staying on the balls of his feet and moving as if made specifically for this battle. Zelda watched in awe. The sword in his hand shone with a soft light, sparkling at every connection with Ganondorf's own corrupted blade of light. Every time he was knocked down, Link quickly sprang to his feet and righted himself, his focus intense and single-minded. Zelda's heart leaped as she watched their blades cross, immense pressure building between as each swordsman vied for the upper hand. They pressed against one another close to the hilts of their blades. At first, Ganondorf appeared to be overpowering the much smaller man before him. Zelda clutched her bow so hard that her fingers began to ache. Just as it seemed he would fail, Link pressed back with a surge of energy. He bared his teeth, and Zelda heard him emit a throaty growl. Ganondorf was forced back before being put on the defensive. Finally, Link pushed the great man away, throwing him off balance. Link surged forward and landed blow after heavy blow across the man's chest, before Ganondorf was able to jump away and regain his composure. They continued their delicate dance, repeating the whole process multiple times before Link finally cast his enemy upon the ground and pounced on his chest, plunging his holy blade through. The golden walls separating Zelda from the fight fell away, and Ganondorf screamed, a blood-curdling sound of rage and despair. Link jumped away, leaving his blade within the evil man as he did so. Ganondorf struggled to his feet once again.
Do not think this ends here.
He growled.
The history of light and shadow will be written in blood.
He grimaced before staring down at his right hand. Zelda felt the power drain from the man, and eventually it vanished from their plane of existence entirely. She sighed, finality washing over her. Ganondorf could no longer hurt them. The Gerudo chieftain stood gasping and whimpering, barely holding on to consciousness. Zelda dismounted and began making her way slowly to Link's side. Ganondorf focused on her face, and a deep sorrow crossed his golden gaze. The man jerked upright suddenly before closing his eyes and bowing his head. Link took a step forward before humming and looking at the swaying grass below him. Zelda did the same, overwhelmed. It was over. A bright light drew Zelda's attention, and she turned. The 4 light spirits rose above the field, blotting out of the light of the setting sun. A soft smile spread over Zelda's face as she realized that a small form now rested on the ground between the spirits. Link gasped, and Zelda turned to watch the young man as he shook his head in disbelief. He took a step, then another, and then broke out into a run over the gentle rise to reach the figure. Zelda's smile widened, and she began limping forward, eager to see their ally herself. Link stopped a few yards from the figure, which now rose from the ground, and turned. Black, white, and cerulean framed by flaming hair and burning eyes turned to look at Link. Zelda arrived just behind the young man as the figure smiled and asked,
What? Say something. Am I so beautiful that you've no words left?
Link blinked, momentarily stunned. Zelda nodded and called,
Indeed, Princess. I believe our great hero is stunned speechless by your beauty.
Midna laughed. A glorious sound, and it seemed to break the spell on Link. The young man beamed and rushed forward, throwing his arms around Midna.
I thought you were dead. I thought you were... goddesses.
Link laughed and held the woman out at arm's length.
Look at you though, Midna.
She laughed again, and Zelda arrived at their sides. And Link moved one of his hands to Zelda's shoulder, pulling them all in for a group hug. Epilogue. A week later, Zelda stood on the stonework of the central fountain in Castle Town, addressing a crowd of people. The faces of Hylians, Gorons, and even a number of Zora looked up at her, their attention captured for the moment. While the young Zora King had refused the invitation, Zelda was pleased to see Chief Darbus in the square with a group of his people flanking him. He beamed and nodded at her, as if in reassurance. Zelda pushed a loose strand of her hair behind an ear, smoothed her cream-colored skirt, and cleared her throat.
My friends,
She began.
thank you all for coming today, and thank the goddesses for such pleasant weather. Our lands and our people have suffered great loss, but today we come together to celebrate the triumph of light over darkness, and a new age of prosperity. Let us all work together to strengthen the bonds of friendship already existing, as well as to forge new alliances for the good of all.
She smiled around the courtyard, happy that everyone seemed pleased with the short speech. She was met with applause and a few scattered cheers. Ivern turned and offered Zelda a hand to help her down from the fountain. She had found him in the castle dungeon, locked in a cell. The bruising on his face gave him a sickly appearance now, streaks of yellow and green around and beneath one of his eyes, the only remaining signs of the abuse he had suffered. More concerning to Zelda was the damage he sustained to one of his shoulders. He carried the arm in a sling now, but she wondered if the older man would ever fully regain function in the arm.
Succinctly put, your ladyship.
Ivern grunted, never taking his eyes from the crowd. He thought the gathering a poor decision if only for the fact that Zelda would be very exposed. And he wasn't confident that they had enough soldiers for adequate defense and security. She had waved off his concerns, pointing out that Link and Midna would be present. Ivern had only agreed once she allowed him to remain at her side as a personal guard. Zelda smiled at him, advisor turned protector, and said,
Thank you, Ivern. I felt a shorter speech would be more appropriate for the audience and setting.
He nodded and gave her a quick half-smile before returning to his surveillance. He passed her the short cane of polished marble that she had taken as a support earlier in the week, and they began moving. They made a slow circuit of the courtyard. Zelda tried to acknowledge everyone present, even if it was only with a few words. She was very appreciative of her people's resilience and choice to come out today, and she wanted them to know that. She had full conversations with members of the nobility who had chosen to make an appearance, though a few of them showed obvious disdain for such a public event. Members of the Merchants Guild also pinned her down for a longer conversation, and they were able to set a new date for the taxation discussion that had never taken place those weeks ago. Zelda made her way almost entirely around the courtyard before she finally found the group of people she had wanted to speak with most. Telma had assured her that they would be here. Ashe, Shad, Aru, Russell, and Telma herself. Midna and Link were also with the group, the Twilight Princess laughing and snorting at something that Aru had just said. She continued to wear the heavy cloak she had requested from Zelda when she initially decided to stay in the world of light for a time, the thick fabric protecting her delicate skin from the intense rays of the sun. Ashe noticed Zelda and Ivern's arrival first and straightened up, forming a fist with one hand and placing it on her breast in a salute before bowing her head.
My lady!
She cried, and the others sobered at the utterance. The only one to remain mirthful was Midna, who instead pulled Zelda into a tight embrace before pinning her to her own hip, supporting her weak leg and beaming back at the group.
We wondered if you would find time for us. Right, fellas?
Link straightened and beamed at Zelda. His green cap hung from his belt today. Across his body from the royal broadsword Zelda had gifted him, along with his knighthood. He wore the crest of his new station on his chest where she had pinned it a few days prior. Zelda smiled around at the group and said,
Of course, Midna. How could I not find time for the saviors of Hyrule? I hear I owe each of you a great debt. Thank you. Truly.
Shad puffed up a bit at the praise, and Aru looked sidelong at Ivern, a grin pulling the corner of his lips. Telma gave a low chuckle. Russell clapped a hand over Link's shoulder as Ashe replied,
We were just performing our duty to Hyrule, Your Eminence. There is no debt.
Her brown eyes were intense, but seemed to sparkle with a quiet joy as Zelda focused on her face. Zelda smiled and nodded, replying smoothly,
Be that as it may, I would like to offer you all permanent positions with the castle. I have already spoken with Link, and he is considering my offer. Ashe, I am interested in learning more about your abilities, and more importantly how they may improve the skills of our military and castle guards. Shad, your curious and cunning mind would be put to good use performing research into our country's past, and how we can prepare best for the future. Aru and Russell, your field investigative skills are impressive to say the least. And Telma?
Zelda smiled at the bar owner.
Your discretion and organizational skills would make you a strong ally, saying nothing of your bolstering personality. I do not expect immediate replies, but please do consider my offer.
She finished, glancing around at the various members of the group. Minna gave her a small squeeze and let out a soft giggle. Ivern shifted on his feet. The gathered allies glanced around at each other, some nodding. After a brief pause, Ashe glanced around the group and stated,
Very well, Princess. We will consider your offers. How's about the crown buys us all a round of drinks at Telma's tonight as well, yeah?
Zelda chuckled and nodded readily.
That sounds like a wonderful idea.
3 days after arriving back at Castle Town, having seen Minna back to the world of Twilight, Zelda sat in a 4-poster bed in a noble's house near the Castle Town Square. Reconstruction was needed at the castle after Ganondorf and Minna's bout, and this noble family had offered their home to Zelda before she even thought of looking for a temporary residence. Ivern insisted that it would be safer and more comfortable for her than in the castle during the reconstruction work. So, to appease him, she had accepted the offer. A few hours prior, Zelda was awakened suddenly from her sleep by the strength of her emotions. Dream and nightmare had swirled and melded like blue and red paint to create an acutely sharp sense of loss, pain, and melancholy, the likes of which Zelda had never experienced before. She had dreamed of her mother and father, of Fergal, and of Phaedra. Zelda hadn't bothered to wipe the tears from her face when she first awoke, knowing that today would be full of their salty mess now that she had allowed the tears to come. She couldn't seem to stop them anyway.
I am so grateful that I got one final conversation with Mother.
She mused, watching the dark sky slowly turn a blushing and soft white through the nearby window.
But now I miss her all the more. I regret my actions so deeply.
She sighed, closing her eyes, and once more seeing the memories that had driven her from sleep in the form of dreams. Happy memories. Times long past that she coveted, now that they were absolutely out of reach. Times of camaraderie and ease with her favored guardsmen had quickly followed, and she sobbed now, remembering her closest friends. Fergal had been nothing more than deeply loyal. But in what capacity that he was able? Zelda realized the man had cared for her intensely. She missed his calming presence, his quiet smiles, and his encouraging words. She leaned into the padded headboard and sobbed again.
I think if there was anyone I could have made a marriage work with, it would have been him. It would have been him, surely.
Zelda shook her head, tears continuing to flow. She wanted to feel into her misery now, wanted to allow herself to process these losses fully.
They are all perfectly tolerable, but none of them spark my interest. I am happy to have such amiable people to work with in the future. The thought of marrying any of them, though?
Oh, you know where babies come from. You're not as prudish as I thought.
Thank you, Kate, for the drink and for listening.
Anytime, Sheik.
Phaedra's voice came back to Zelda as clearly as if her friend was in the room with her. And what little composure Zelda had been hanging on to finally sheared away. She sobbed audibly, feeling the loss of her best friend as a dagger through her heart. Zelda had thought she accepted losing Phaedra after the goddess ceremony, but watching her friend die before her eyes had torn the wound open afresh.
It would pain me to see harm come to any of you,
Phaedra had said, but Zelda knew the words were meant for her.
At least...
Zelda took a shuddering breath.
At least she did not have to witness the results of my folly.
She focused on calming herself down.
I will repeat that you must trust yourself, Zelda. Trust in your own strength and fortitude, and until you are able to do so, you can trust in me and in my judgment. I know it feels hard right now, and you have lost much, but there is still much to gain and to experience. Have confidence in your wisdom, and everything will work out as it should.
Hylia's words suddenly sounded through Zelda's mind. The tears continued to flow, and the pain in her heart did not subside. But she focused on the goddess' advice to her.
I will try to trust Hylia. Trust that everything that has gone wrong can still be righted. Even in me.
She snuffled and reached up to dry her face with the sheet. The sky continued to change colors. More intense pink and light blue beginning to spill across the visible sky.
I will continue to process everything, to heal from it. I will not forget any of them. But I will try to keep moving forward. For them, for Hylia, and for myself.
Zelda pushed the blankets away and stood, immediately grabbing the marble cane she had left near the bedside the night before, and then making her way to the window. The cool air caressed her bare arms, but she did not feel cold. She focused on the sunrise. A quiet knock on the door interrupted the silence, and Zelda turned to watch it open. She did not know how long she had stood there, only that the sky was fully colored now. Ivor nodded to her as he entered, and then closed the door.
Up already, Your Majesty.
Zelda gave a sad smile and looked at the bed.
I was... remembering. I could not sleep any longer.
She explained. Understanding dawned on her mentor's face, and he clasped his hands behind his back. Zelda still worried for his shoulder. But Ivern had insisted that she was fussing over him when she had questioned him about removing the sling. He took a few steps forward and offered his strong arm.
It will likely take some time to come to terms with all that has happened, my queen.
Ivern murmured as he began guiding her back to the bed.
But please, try to remember all that we have saved, and all that we can work toward now. I will always be here for you, my dear, should you want to talk about anything.
Zelda sat on the bed and nodded, smiling at Ivern. She wondered if he could sense how broken her heart was now.
I appreciate that, Ivan. Thank you for always supporting me.
She replied, tears again lining her eyes. Ivern patted her hand and smiled at her, the expression full of warmth and love.
Of course, Your Majesty. I will go gather your breakfast.
Later that day, Zelda sat at a large table surrounded by her council.
I am meeting with the merchants this afternoon, and I believe Terrason wanted to give an update on the castle's progress after that. Is there any other pressing business to attend to today, or shall I continue reviewing the documents recovered from the archives?
The advisors gathered around the table, with the addition of Shad and Aru, looked around at each other before Ivern cleared his throat, and stated,
There appear to be some newcomers in the land, Your Majesty. Aru brought their presence to my attention late last night when he arrived. Aru, will you share with the council what you told me?
Aru nodded and folded his hands before him on the table before uttering.
Yesterday, early in the morning, I saw a cloud of dust approaching on the horizon from far away to the west. I was continuing some research that I started a few years ago in the Gerudo Desert. I watched, and the dust thinned enough to reveal a group of nomadic women, my lady. One galloped ahead on the back of a camel, and I received her.
Murmurs of surprise rippled around the table before Zelda silenced them with a glance. Aru continued.
The woman claimed that there are peaceful groups searching for a place to settle down and call their own. She claimed that her people are the last remnants of the ancient Gerudo tribe, Your Grace. I asked her to send a messenger here to treat officially with our monarch. The messenger should be following me tomorrow or the next day.
Zelda looked down at the table and nodded.
I am prepared to hear their plea.
She began.
Ivan, can you and O'Shea make sure that we have enough soldiers on hand to ensure everyone's safety at this meeting? I do not wish to intimidate them. However, as an unknown group, I feel it prudent to take certain measures.
Ivan replied, and the council spent the next hour discussing considerations for the meeting and for potentially welcoming a new group of people into the Hyrulean Alliance. Zelda listened attentively, contentness growing in her heart. She knew that there would be much more healing to work through, and many more hardships ahead for their kingdom. But she looked forward to the future with hope.